In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how we can create these really cool lightning effects and make this Thor composition. Let's check it out. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Jason Ortega here with Blended Graphics, and for today's video, I got a fun one in store for you. I'm going to show you how we can create these really awesome lightning brushes, as well as I'm going to take you step by step of how I created my Thor composition. If you follow me on Instagram or have seen some of my previous videos, it is no surprise to you that I do love Marvel, and today we're focusing on my favorite Avenger, Thor. If you are just now joining us for the very first time, and you find out that you really like these videos, please be sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell to stay notified. I do have a lot more videos in store for you. We are also on day number 23 of this 30 days of Photoshop journey, so we are winding down to the end here. Okay, I'm gonna stop my rambling. Let's jump right into this tutorial. Okay, immediately you're probably thinking, Jason, this is not Photoshop, and you're absolutely correct. We're actually in After Effects. If you do have After Effects, this is a great program on so many different levels, but this is where we're going to use to create some of these really cool lightning brushes. If you don't have this program, do not worry, because I'm going to show you how else we can create the brushes. This is just kind of a bonus if you do have it. So if you don't have this, feel free to skip ahead, or if you want to watch, join along. Alright, so within After Effects, we want to navigate over to this Effects and Presets column here. And we are looking for lightning horizontal. So once you have that, go ahead and click and drag that into your main composition. And then you can move these little anchors to both the left and right side of the screen. And then on the left, we want to click where it says two-way strike, and then scroll to where it says direction and click on that. From here, we can just play around with some of these settings on the left. We can first go to conductivity state. And once we click on that, we can move this anchor, and this will kind of change the shape a little bit of our lightning bolt. So play around with that. And then we can go to our core settings, and this is essentially that middle line of our lightning bolt here. And we can change around with the radius. You know, just depends on what your preferences are and how prominent you want it to be. We can also go to the opacity. And again, depending on how bright you want this, you can change that there. You can also change the color, but we will go ahead and just leave the color as white. Let's move down to the glow settings. And then for the green, we're going to change that to white, because for the brush, we need to have complete white and black, so no color involved. I also find it best for the brushes that in the radius that we drop this down, and so it's not so fuzzy. I think the quality is much better when we shrink this. Let's even drop that opacity down as well. All right, let's close this and visit some of our other settings. Let's go to turbulence, and by doing this, you can see how it changes our lightning bolt, so feel free to play with that. We can also go down to the forking, and this will kind of give us some different branching off points of our lightning bolt. And then for decay, that will shrink down those endpoints a little bit if you want to, so feel free to play with that. We can also move down to the expert settings. We can go into complexities and change that. And you can see how crazy it gets real fast. So just be careful with it, and feel free to experiment with these as well. We're just going to kind of stick to these top sections though. All right, so let's click on that solid layer, Command D to duplicate it, and then just move this slider left or right, and then that'll change it up a little bit and give it some more variety. Command D to make another one. We can turn these bottom layers off so we can see what we're working with. And again, just kind of move this around and just get something different. And we're just going to work with these three for right now. Let's go to the top to composition, scroll down to where it says save frame as, and then click on Photoshop layers. Let's give it a title and click save. And at this point, we don't need After Effects anymore, so let's jump over to Photoshop. So once you're in Photoshop, you need to go up to File, and then let's hit Open, and then find that file that you just saved, and then we'll open that up. And now we have our 3 lightning bolts, or however many that you created. We want to create a bottom layer that's black, and I'm only doing that just so we can see these lightning bolts. We actually need to invert these colors for the brushes. So with this top layer selected, let's hit Command I, and then our bottom layer, let's hit Command I on that. So now all these colors are inverted. At this point, you just need to go to Edit, down to Define Brush Preset, click that, give it a name, and once you have that, hit OK. And now you have your brush. Let's turn this off. We can invert this bottom layer back to black. And let's shrink this brush down and just give it a dab. It's as easy as that. So now you just have to go back and do these same exact steps again for your other lightning layers. Okay, let's move on with the tutorial. First thing I want to do is drop in our mountains, and that's going to be our main background layer. We can use the quick selection tool to select this sky, and then we can go ahead and click on that layer mask. Command I, invert that so we have just the mountains. And then let's drag these mountains down, scale them up a little bit, and we're just going to find a nice place for them somewhere in the bottom here. So that looks pretty good. You can hit enter. Then let's drop in Thor. He's already cut out from his background. Okay, from here, we can just move these mountains down a little bit. Something right around here. And once we have this set, we're going to bring in our sky. We're going to have a couple of sky images. So here's our first one. Command T to transform this, and we'll put this off to the right side because I just kind of like the way this cloud looks on the right. And we can move these mountains again just a little bit. Okay, and now we can bring in our next sky image, and let's scale this up quite a bit. And this will obviously be on the left side of our sky. And then I'm just adjusting our other one again. Maybe move this so it kind of frames the outline of Thor there. Okay, and then we can start painting away on the layer mask of that top layer. And so that way we just kind of blend these two images together. We will match the tones here in just a second. I just kind of want to get a good feel of what I want our sky to look like. All right, so for the clouds on the left, we're going to use a brightness and contrast adjustment layer and just decrease the brightness a little bit and increase the contrast to kind of match the clouds on the right. And then we're going to drop a hue and saturation adjustment layer for the clouds on the right and desaturate that so it kind of matches with the clouds on the left. We just want to get a good starting off point here. So something right around here. And now I'm just painting on that layer mask of the clouds on the right just to, again, kind of get that desired look that I want for our sky. So it's just a lot about experimenting and just finding what works best for you. Okay, let's group these two sky layers together, and then we're going to add a brightness and contrast adjustment layer on top of that. Clip it below. And let's increase this contrast. Let's drop the brightness a bit. And once we have this set, let's bring in some color using the color balance adjustment layer. And I think I'm just going to kind of gravitate more towards the cyan and blue tones for this and just kind of cool this overall sky. The clouds on the right side originally had those colors to it, and I really like the vibe of that. So that's pretty much my inspiration behind this, and we're going to try to emulate that here. And let's see a quick before and after. And we can drop down the opacity just a bit. And let's intensify these clouds a bit more. We're going to add a solid color adjustment layer, find a nice deep blue tone to work with. So something here. And we can put this into a hard light blend mode, drop the opacity quite a bit. And we need to have this contrast because once we introduce all the lighting effects, in order to make all of those glows really effective, we have to have that contrast. So that's why we need to have a dark background. Alrighty, let's move on. Now that we have our sky set, let's move on to our mountains. First, bring in a brightness and contrast adjustment layer, drop both of those. Then we can add an exposure adjustment layer and decrease that brightness even more. So we have a bit of a white fringe going on with our mountains. And to get rid of that, let's first click on our mountains layer mask, go up to filter, down to other, and then let's click minimum. We can leave this at the 1 pixel, press OK. And all this is going to do is just reduce that by 1 pixel. If you need to change that and make it more, go ahead and do so. But the 1 pixel was good enough for us. Okay, let's move on and we can start to do some color grading with our mountains. We will start out with a color balance adjustment layer and introduce those same tones, the cyans and blues a little bit to help match that sky. All right, this is looking good. And now we can add that same solid color adjustment layer and find one of these blend modes to work with. So we'll just use that same last one that we used, drop the opacity. And I'm going to drop the opacity just a bit more. Okay, let's bring Thor in, and now we need to darken him up by using an exposure adjustment layer. And now we're going to use the levels adjustment layer to create some highlights and shadows. So first, let's work with the highlights. We'll bring that in. Command I, invert the mask. Let's drop in another levels adjustment layer. And this time we're gonna just decrease all of the highlights out of here. We'll also invert that mask. And now we can paint back on our highlights and bring some of that in. Okay, let's see what it looks like before. And then with him back on. Yeah, so it adds that nice pop that we're looking for. Okay, let's go to our shadows now and just decrease some of this area of his body. Okay, so we're just wrapping up here. Let's go ahead and drop the opacity a little bit and see what it looks like before. And then back on. And unlike the highlights, this one isn't as noticeable of a change, but it still helps us create that realistic impression that we're going for. I now want to add a path blur onto Thor just to give us that impression that he's in motion and he's coming from that left side. So let's go up to Filter, down to Blur Gallery, and click on Path Blur. And now let's move these little anchor points to the path that we want. Let's reduce the speed quite a bit. And then we're going to go down to Grain, bring some of that in, and we're going to reduce the end speed, and then let's hit OK. And since he's our main focus, I don't need to have blur on the entire part of his body, so I'm just painting black on some of these areas that I want to be a bit more clear focused. And this is looking pretty good. We can now do some color grading, so let's use the color balance adjustment layer, and again, bring in some more of those cooler tones. Okay, let's do a quick before and after. And I think we can bring in a hue and saturation adjustment layer, and let's just desaturate some of this a bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and now start bringing in some more atmospheric effects, and we're going to introduce some haze and some fog. So we're going to go up to our brushes, and let's find a good, like a dust brush to use I think will work for this. And let's just do a couple of spots around here. I'm using a sampled color from our sky already. And we can even change up the brush, use maybe a cloud brush this time. And we're going to add a new layer and just do a couple more dabs here. Alright, this is looking good, and we'll continue to add more effects like this further on into the composition. Right now, let's transition over to the lightning effect. So I know we already had created some brushes using the After Effects program, but not all of you are going to have After Effects. So this is where this part of the video is going to come in handy for you. We have a stock image of a lightning photo here. And with this photo, let's put it into a screen blending mode. We're going to add a levels adjustment layer because we need to make those darker points even darker. So let's drag in those anchors. Okay, and once we have that, we're going to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer and desaturate this. If you want that blue, you can keep it, but let's just go ahead and desaturate this. And then on the layer mask of the lightning itself, we're just going to paint away some of this area here that we don't really need. And there you go, you have your lightning strike. Now, if you want to turn this into the brush, you just repeat those steps that we did earlier on in this video. You can bring in a new document, drop this image in there, make sure that your lightning bolt is black, and you can continue to erase some of the areas that you don't want, and you can play around with the levels again just to help you create the look that you're going for. And then once you're ready, go to Edit and then Define Brush Preset and give it a name, and there you have your lightning bolt that way. I'm going to delete this, and I'm just going to use the brushes that I have. So let's go ahead and find a good one to use here. And on a layer behind our mountains, we're just going to maybe do one on this side. Okay, and then we can bring one over on the left side. That looks good. And now I'm going to go back to a soft round brush tip, and we're going to start doing some effects on Thor. So let's shrink this down, find a good bluish tone to work with, and I'm just going to paint on all these little circle plates on his chest here. And then I'm going to condense our brush tip for these bottom two. So let's get this one here. And our last one. All right, I'm going to do a second round of this using a lighter shade of blue. So let's just go back around to each one of these. And this is going to help build up that glow effect. All right, and now let's find a good blend mode to use. And we'll go with this linear dodge. We can drop the opacity a bit. Okay, I'm going to now add a third round of this, and this is going to be white. This is going to be the center of our plates here and the brightest part. And this is how I do all of my glow work. You can see I've added 3 different colors to make this effect. And then we'll even find a good blend mode to use for this one as well. All right, so now that we have these effects in place, let's go ahead and introduce some lightning effects. And we're gonna jump over into this image here where we already have a lightning bolt set up in a good position. And this is where things are gonna get very tedious for this composition. It's a time-consuming process to manipulate all of these lightning strikes and wrapping it around the body to get the look that you're going for. So to achieve this effect, let's first click on our lightning bolt. We're gonna convert it to a smart object, then press Command T to transform, and then right click, we're gonna go down to warp. And then from here, we're just gonna maneuver this around to wrap it around the body and create that formation that we want. And to help us out with this effect, we need to create some grid points. So let's go to the top where it says grid, click on that, and we want 3 by 3. And now you can just drag any of these points here to wherever you want it to be and how you want this lightning to look on your character. So we're just gonna continue to do this a little bit. And we'll hit OK, and then we can erase some of these edges here that we don't want using a soft round brush. And that's really the process of how to do this. I'm going to go ahead and skip over this part here just because it's very repetitive and it'll take too long. And we're just going to get to a point where I've already incorporated a lot of lightning strikes on Thor to where I'm happy with. All right, and now that we're here, I just want to talk a little bit about the placement of my lightning bolts. I wanted to do my best to accentuate his body and try to match the contour and shape. So I added a lot along the edges. I tried to wrap around the formation of his muscles because I thought that might be the most effective and complementary to Thor. And so when you are using lightning or any other element in your composition, for instance, try to have a motive and a reason behind your placement and not just make it so random. Okay, let's move forward. Right now, I'm going to add some glows on his eyes. So I have a light cyan color that I'm going to add to both of his eyeballs. And let's go ahead and bring back the brush tip to its normal round shape. And we're going to add a couple of glows onto each eye. I went ahead and reduced the opacity as well for this. And we can even add some lightning bolts onto his eyes for a bit of dramatic effect. Okay, this is looking good. Let's move over to his hammer. We're going to add a solid color adjustment layer, and let's find a nice teal blue color to work with. And we're going to put this into one of our blend modes here. Just something that works well with his hammer. And let's invert that layer mask by pressing Command I, and we're going to paint back in just this area of the hammer itself. That's the only part I really want blue. All right, this is looking good. Let's use the polygonal lasso tool, and we're going to create some selections on this hammer that we're going to paint over and just create some highlights here. So we're going to use a brighter color than what we have. And let's just paint some of the edges in here just to start enhancing this effect and give it some glow. All right, and now we can go back over and just touch up some areas here. And if you didn't see that, we are in a hard light blend mode. So just kind of take your time with this, and we can go back to using the polygonal lasso tool to give us a really precise cutout of what we want to use to paint in. Since his hammer is so close to his cape, that's why I'm using these selections to make sure that none of the color gets onto the cape and it sticks to just the hammer. So we're going to add more glows to this. We're going to have a new layer, switch up our blue, and just do a couple of spots here on the ends just to create a little bit of glow. And then we can bring back our lightning brushes and put some of these along the edges and paint away some of the areas that we don't want. So just go ahead and continue to do this on the hammer. I'm just going to jump immediately to the end result of where I added all of those lightning strikes. And here we are. And then at this point, I actually wanted to go back and rearrange some of those lightning strikes. So let's jump forward to after making those additions. Okay, so this looks a lot better than what we had originally. Now I'm going to go to that lightning bolt in the sky in the back right, and we're just going to erase some of this just because I don't want it to be too close to Thor and I don't want it to be too distracting. Let's now double click on our lightning group layer, and we're going to go to color overlay, and we're going to give this a bit of a blue tint and just give it some color so it's not just white. So that looks good. Let's hit OK. And now we can even just reduce the opacity a bit on this. So I'm thinking somewhere around here looks pretty good. Let's hit OK. And let's continue with the color grading on Thor. We're going to add a solid color adjustment layer and just find a nice blue to work with. So something right here, and we can go ahead and clip it on there, put it into one of our blend modes, maybe overlay or soft light. Let's do soft light. We can reduce the opacity, and let's check out the before and after on this. Okay, and now we're going to find another color to use to enhance our glows on our lightning. So something pretty bright, and we're just going over some of those areas again just to help enhance that effect. And we can even switch up the colors a little bit, give it more of a blue tint. All right, let's see the before and after. And maybe we can touch up some of this area on his arm, just a couple more spots. All right, so now we've added a new layer behind Thor, and we're just softly going around some of the edges here just to give him a little bit of glow behind him. And this will also help separate him from our background a little bit. And we can even zoom in and paint some of this away since we did a little bit too much. Alrighty, from here we can add a color balance adjustment layer, and we're going to crank up a lot of these blue tones. And what we're going to do, this is just going to be mainly for his chest and a little bit on his legs as well, that we're going to bring in some more color. All right, so we've inverted the mask, and now we're just painting some of this back in, just along those areas like I just said, around his chest and a little bit on his legs here. And now we don't want Thor to stick out like a sore thumb, so let's bring in some blues to our background. We're doing the same thing with a color balance adjustment layer, cranking up the blue tones, and this is going to help blend everything together much better. And this will pretty much wrap it up. Let's close this and see a before and after. And we can reduce the opacity a little bit. And I want to darken up those mountains, so we're going to add a brightness and contrast adjustment layer, decrease both the brightness and the contrast to this. And this will just about do it. Let's add some blur to our mountains as well. We're going to go to Filter, Blur Gallery, Tilt Shift Blur. And from here, let's just move these sliders up. I want there to be more blur at the bottom. And let's go ahead and reduce the amount. And we can also incorporate some grain to this. And let's see if I can slide these up a little bit more. Doesn't look like it. All right, so we can add just a little bit more blur. And we can go over to the slider on the right here as well to do that. And from here, let's hit OK. And now we're going to click on our clouds layer, which is the clouds at the bottom. We're going to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer, put it into colorize, and now we can give some of that blue tones as well. So we can darken this up a little bit, play around with the saturation, and then let's lower the opacity. Okay, that looks pretty good. We're going to add a new layer above our sky, and we're just going to paint some haze right behind these mountains. We want to create a bit of a separation because everything is just kind of blending together, and we need to have that contrast. And we can even go to one of our dust brushes, and let's find a good one here. And then we can use this as well to create a little bit of a barrier and some separation for us. And let's go back to our colors. Let's find something that's lighter. And because we have all of that lightning in the background, we have to brighten this area up a bit. We can actually go back to our layer mask and paint black on some of these areas and tone it down just a little bit. Okay, and now we can go back to our lightning strikes and let's add something in the sky here. So find a good color. All right, and let's just do something right up here in the clouds. And I don't want it to be too distracting from Thor because I want him to be our main focus, but I still want to give a little bit of lightning in our sky here. So we can erase some of this area that we don't need. And maybe we'll double click on this. Let's go to color overlay. Maybe if we can find a good color to work on top of this, that's a little bit different. All right, let's do that. And now we can erase some of this area just a little bit. We can even add a little bit of glow around this on the sky just to enhance the light from the lightning. And we can find a good blend mode to use. And we can even go around to different areas of the sky and lighten that up a bit so it's not so dark. This will also give us the impression that maybe there's some lightning that we're just not seeing within the clouds here. And I'm just going to continue to do this and just touch up a few more areas here. So just some spots around here, maybe a little bit up here by this lightning again, up in this corner, we'll do a little bit, and right around here. Okay, we want to put this into an overlay blend mode. And then we're going to add a new layer behind Thor. We're going to go back to our normal brush tip, rotate this around, and let's open this up a bit more. And we'll just do a dab right behind Thor. We can even change up our color, find something a bit more saturated. And this is also going to give these mountains a bit of that hazy look from the weather that's occurring. This is also going to create more separation between our main subject and the background. So it acts as a couple of different purposes. And now we need to add a new layer on top of Thor, and we're going to add some glow from his hammer that's going to get reflected off of his left side here. Okay, and now we're going to add a brighter color to use as a highlight around his hand and some of those areas closest to our hammer. And we're just going to take our time with this, try to be as accurate as possible. And I really want to try to add some glow right on the edge of his arm. It's a bit tight there, so we need to be pretty precise. So we're going to use that polygonal lasso tool like we did before. So let's select that. And now let's just create a little section here to use that we can isolate it and make sure that we're not going to paint on any other part of our character here. So we have that, and let's just paint on this edge. That's going to, again, be closest to the hammer. We can also get a bit of the handle and some of his fingertips. And I'm going to press Command D to deselect, add a bit more on this handle. And we can go ahead and put this into overlay blend mode. And now we can go back and just add a few more touch-ups around the areas. And we can even add a little bit more on his leg here. We hit the bottom of that handle. We can even do the side of his leg down to his foot there. And let's add a glow right behind this hammer here to lighten that up. All right, we're going to go back to Thor, and we're going to add some more highlights around the cape and try to get all these little areas. The good thing about this is there's already some highlights there that we can work off of and to help us out. So we can outline some of these areas. And I'm just going to speed through this since we have a lot more to do, and you don't need to hear me talking throughout the whole thing. All right, and I'm back. So we just finished up adding all those different highlights onto Thor. What I'm going to do now is I want to add a lot more glow behind Thor and to just really light up this composition a little bit. So I'm repeating the same exact steps, and you don't need to see me do all of this. So I'm just going to skip right over to that with those adjustments. So you can see all that I really did was I just brightened up some of those areas around the edges of Thor, gave him a bit more separation between him and the background, played around with the blend modes. I even brightened up the bottom of that picture as well. And that's really all there was to it. So nothing too complicated. What I want to do now though is let's drop in this rain texture. And we're going to scale this up just so that it fits our whole composition. And we'll hit that check mark or press enter. And we're going to put this into a screen blend mode. And on that layer mask, let's just paint away some of the areas that we don't want. So just mainly up in the top here. Okay, and we're going to bring in another rain image. Let's rotate this so it matches that same diagonal path. Also put this into a screen blend mode. Repeat the same process. We'll first lower the opacity and paint away some of the areas that we don't want on that layer mask. Alright, and now I'm going to switch to one of my raindrop brushes, and we're just going to add some little droplets bouncing off of some areas of his body here. Let's add a few more glows on top of him. We're just at the point now where we're just kind of rounding things out and doing our final effects. So I'll do a few more touch-ups around here and a little bit on his hammer. And I'm going to pause here for just a second, and I'm just going to give you a little tip of what I like to do in a lot of my compositions, especially when I'm working with glows. I like to use a soft round brush, and in the brush settings, I like to flatten the brush tip as much as I can, and then I like to use that as a bit of an accent for a highlight. So you'll see here, we're on the hammer right now, and I'm just lining up the edges and just doing a couple of dabs here on white just to give it that accent pop that we need. It's something that's so minimal, but I think it really boosts the effectiveness of the glow and just the overall highlighting effect. But let's go ahead and continue here, and we're going to add a few more glows around his body and a little bit on his hammer. And then we can even go up and reduce the opacity. All right, let's go down and see the before and after effects of that hammer. And everything is looking good. We are at the point now where we can merge all of these layers together. Let's first create a new layer at the very top. And then let's press Command-Shift-Option-E, and that's going to merge all of our layers together into this new layer. And then we're going to convert it to a smart object, go up to Filter, down to Camera Raw Filter, and I'm going to see you in just a second after I make all of these final adjustments. And here we are with that final image. I'm satisfied with how everything came together nicely, and I really enjoyed making this composition. Hopefully you enjoyed watching it as well. My goals with all of these videos is that hopefully I can leave you with a little bit of information that can help speed up your workflow or help give you some tips that can increase the overall quality of your compositions. And if you did like this video, please let me know down there in the comments section, as well as be sure to hit that like button. Thanks again to everyone who made it through this entire video and made it to the finish line with myself. Hope to see you back again tomorrow with another video. In the meantime, I wish you all the best. Take care.